believe me, no matter how much you've messed up, you can still lead your family spiritually. Think about Paul, think about David. I think leading as a biblical man requires constant rejection of that lie that tells us we're disqualified, constantly getting back up and saying, hey, I'm not going to let that failure define me. I'm going to keep leading anyway. I'm going to keep going until God takes me home. I'm not going to just sit on the sideline.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Built Different podcast. My name is Zach Clinton. I'll be your host, and as we continue to grow, I'll have friends joining me each week to interview some of the leading experts in the fields of motivational speaking, mental health, ministry, and even sports. Our goal is to instill hope, encouragement, and motivation in and through your life today. And our prayer is that after each episode, you'd be more equipped and encouraged to look, love, and live more like Christ from the inside out. That's our definition of what it means to be built different. So I hope you're ready. You better buckle up. Let's roll. David, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today.
Zach, thanks for having me, bro. Great to be here.
David, so excited, man, just to have you on the show. I know we got to see each other several times at previous Ignite Men's Impact weekends, whether it be at other men's ministry events, related types of things. But I'm grateful today just to be able to dive into and unpack a little bit more of your story, your testimony, and all the incredible things that God is doing in and throughout your life, but also your ministry in Men's Alliance. As we begin, my friend, we're going into Father's Day weekend. Father's Day is something that is, pivotal in the Clinton household, something that I always look forward to because of the impact and the influence that my dad continues to have on my life every single day. What Father's Day looks like for us, probably outside somewhere, throwing a pigskin around, playing some catch with the baseball gloves out, going to the farm, taking a walk, going hunting, fishing, doing something together. That's what it's all about. But I want to ask up front, before we dive into, masculinity, the toxic side of things, the biblical side of things, what that looks like, Men's Alliance, I got to ask you up front, David, what does Father's Day look like in the Mills household?
Man, that's such a great question. Father's Day in my house, right now I'm in this cool stage of life where I've still got 3 teenagers under my roof, still got 3 teenagers at home, and my dad is 80 years old, and he's 2 hours down the road from us.
Wow.
So Father's Day is going to look like, getting some homemade cards from my kids if they remember, and and also probably playing horseshoes in the backyard with my dad as well. There will probably be some homemade ice cream being made.
Okay,
and,
what flavor?
I don't know. That's always it's always changing. It's ever changing. Some sort of probably chocolate.
Nice.
But maybe throw in a bunch of strawberries or something and go that route. But it's great. God has blessed us. We have 4 kids. One is grown and gone and married and serving in the military, and 3 are still at home. 2 are driving. We've got an 18 and a 16-year-old driving at home right now, and a 14-year-old at home as well. So we're in the trenches. We're in the thick of it. We're in the busy stage of life, and we love it.
Man, David, let me tell you, it's obvious, like you said, that you're in a very special season of life. 4 kids. You also get the opportunity of spending time with what you said was an 80-year-old father. Is that what you said, 80 years old?
Yeah, that's
Man,
right.
Those are special memories, my friend, but it all comes back to that word together. Why Father's Day can be so special and meaningful to all the listeners and viewers out there is spend time with each other. That's how memories are made. David, one thing I want to dive into a little bit with you up front is it's evident in my time that I've spent with you at events, but also just right here, you have a heart and a passion for steering and drawing men closer to the heart of God. As I mentioned, you're the president and founder of Men's Alliance, a ministry that is geared towards sharpening men to become the husbands, fathers, and leaders that God designed us to be. David, I'd be interested just in knowing up front, though, when was it for you that this call to men's ministry really came about? But then also tell us a little bit about what God is doing just recently in Men's Alliance. You were just telling me about a father-daughter camp, and you guys are kind of riding that high. I would love for you to share more with our listeners and viewers.
Awesome, man. Well, this really came to be in my life. My last couple of years, I was on active duty in the Air Force. So I
Yeah.
did 20 years and never had a plan to ever do anything with ministry afterwards. Um, it wasn't until so I retired 2 years ago, but it was about 9 years ago that God really got a hold of me and changed my heart. And soon thereafter, I was looking around the church that I was in, and I knew I needed something different. I knew that if I was going to make my change, the 180 that I had just done, if I was going to make that last, I would need to surround myself with a group of strong Christian men
Yeah.
and warriors to keep me on course. So I literally started Men's Alliance as just a small group at the church I was going to at the time because it's what I needed in my life. And I needed it to be, my number one thought was, I need to be in a group that's super real,
Yeah.
like raw and
Yeah.
gritty about our struggles. And I don't want to be in a group where everybody says they're fine and pretends that they read the chapter for that week in their small group. Because I had been in some groups like that, and it just felt like, man, am I the only one here whose life is really screwed up? Because everybody else is either perfect or they're faking it. So my goal setting out was I want a group where men are like, man, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with alcohol. I'm struggling with pornography. My wife left me. You know, I got fired. Just putting it all out there. And I was like, I'm envisioning such a group would have to take place outdoors around a fire.
Yeah.
I just can't picture men being this open and honest anywhere else. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start this group. Going to be outside around a fire. And then I was like, we should start off with a workout together. That should be like our icebreaker. So that's kind of how this thing started. So now we've got, this month we're launching tribe number 93 in the country.
Wow.
And so we've gone from just that small group I started at my church. And what happened was a guy was like, hey, I just want to start something like this at my church. Could you help me do that? Another guy says the same thing. And then God starts moving people.
Wow.
A guy that's in a tribe in Virginia moves to Alaska. And then he starts a tribe, and a guy from that tribe moves to Texas. So God just kind of starts spreading the fire around. But it all just got started out of that simple idea of this is what I need, and it's just resonated with men. So it's been taken off. That's how it started. We're 7 years old, but really the first 5 years was just putting down roots with no real attempt at making a ministry. So then I'm getting, this is the long answer to your question. So
I love it.
I start to come up on 20 years in the Air Force, and what I really should have done smart financial wise was stay in for 8 more years.
I hear you.
Get all my kids out of the house while there's still a steady paycheck coming. But I just felt so strongly like I just want to jump in with both feet full time and really just hit the gas pedal with this ministry and see where it can go and how God can use it. So made the decision I told my wife one night, I was like, you know what? We're going to be missionaries in America to men. That's what this is going to amount to. So,
yes.
Bailed out of the Air Force at 20 years in one day and, incorporated Men's Alliance as a nonprofit 501c3. We're called Tip of the Spear Ministries.
Wow.
And because we believe we're kind of on the forefront of doing something, unique in this country. And God has just been blessing that. That was a year and a half ago. And at that time, we had 6 tribes. And real quickly, we went from 6 to 26.
Right.
And part of the story of Men's Alliance is God bringing the right men into my life.
Yes.
A guy shows up and he's like, hey, I know how to franchise.
Yep.
I'm like, wow. Another guy shows up and he's like, hey, I'm an accountant. Another guy's like, I'm an attorney. I'm like, praise God, because I have none of those skills or abilities. I wouldn't even know where to find you guys. So God's just brought this team together. Truly, it is an alliance of men making this happen. So that's a little bit of the history of it. And then, like you said, this past weekend we did a first. We started a father-daughter camp out.
Wow.
We call it Warrior Princess, and we did 2 nights in tents.
Wow.
We had a little over 140 dads and daughters
It's
out in a
amazing.
big field. Here's the best part, Zach. It poured rain. It poured rain Friday night and again Saturday night.
Wow.
So everybody got to experience leaky tents
Oh, yeah.
and raincoats. But during the days, it was great. And so we were running around, and the girls got to get tribal and rugged and real, right? And so we had them shooting bows and arrows and air guns and catching fish. We had tons of girls caught their first fish, and they were hauling in some pretty nice bass.
Wow.
And, but the best part was just the dads coming up to us and saying, "This is the most time I've ever spent with my daughter one-on-one," or I just prayed with my daughter, and I just learned something about my daughter, and that, to me, that was the big win. Like you said, our mission is sharpening men to become better husbands and fathers and leaders, and this event just really capitalized on that. So we're excited as Men's Alliance is kind of doing some more things, and we've got our Warrior Night father-son camp out that we're pumped about, and that's coming up in September. And so as we keep growing, we just want to stay true to our mission, stay focused on things that are going to make men better husbands, fathers, and leaders, and just have fun with it too.
Yeah.
And I love the stuff you're doing, right? And we've partnered together, and your Ignite conferences are incredible. And at all of these things, you see life change.
Yes.
You see a life change, and that right there, that just fuels you to keep going.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't matter what details go wrong here and there.
Yep.
We have technical trouble here, or the tents are leaking. None of that matters. We're on mission.
We're on mission, my friend. That's what I love about what we get to do, right? Is that we get we get the opportunity to provide opportunities then for men, right? Fathers and husbands to be able to not only grow in their relationship with God, but like you said, in fellowship and in discipleship with one another. That's why I love what Men's Alliance is doing, what you guys are doing, because, Ignite is an incredible opportunity for men to come and build those relationships. But then you guys are like the discipleship aspect. Like you said, being around a fire on a daily, weekly basis where you can be with other men and you can be real. You can be rugged, right? You can be raw. You can do all of these things together. David, I got to ask you this because like you mentioned, I remember at Ignite, if anybody was listening or watching was at Ignite, I mean, they saw this never-ending line of guys that just came out, right? These tribes. I mean, it was like never, and I was like, holy cow, there's so many guys. It was awesome to see what God is doing in and throughout this ministry. And as you just mentioned, going from that first fire that you said, I'm going to bring some of my buddies together and I just want a place of authenticity and vulnerability, to now seeing it, tribe number 93 just now being launched. What has that shown you and revealed to you about like the heart and the character of God from the inception of Men's Alliance to today?
Wow, man, that's a great question. I remember the first night. So I had announced it around the church, and I was still pretty new. I hadn't been going to this church that I was starting something. Nobody likes somebody to come in brand new and start something.
Yeah.
And I was kind of that guy. I'd been going to this church for about 6 months, and I went up to the pastor after his sermon one Sunday morning, and I said, "Hey, would it be okay if I started a men's group here? I'm not a member. I don't know if that's a problem. Do I need to become a member? I don't know. I just want to start this thing." And he goes, if somebody at this church will start something, I don't care if they're a member or not. I'll help you out any way I can.
Wow.
And that pastor, that yes that he gave me that day that enabled all of this. I
Yeah.
was very much encouraged. And so I got there a few minutes early on that first night, and I was with my son, and he was just 13 at the time. And we built a fire, and there was about 6, 7 inches of snow, a little bit of Virginia snow,
Yeah.
and got a big fire going. And then we're just sitting there waiting, and it was going to start at 7 p.m. and it was about 6:50.
Mm.
And I'll never forget my son saying, "Dad, what if nobody shows up?"
Mm.
And I was thinking that is a very real possibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I've just put out something that I don't know if it's going to be popular at all. I was like, "Hey, who wants to go outside in the snow and work out at 7 p.m.?"
Mm.
And I told him, I said, "Well, you know what? If nobody else shows up, it's totally fine because me and you, we're going to have a workout and a devotion, and we've
Amen.
already got a great fire, so it doesn't really matter about numbers." And a few seconds later, another dad and son came walking up,
Wow.
and then another guy came walking up, and so we had 5 of us there that first night. So what I've felt from seeing the way it's grown, to your question, is I'm constantly praying for God to use me as his tool to reach men.
Yes.
And I'm in a little town outside of Richmond called Midlothian.
Yep.
And I used to pray, my prayer used to be for a couple of years, it was, "God, use me as your tool to reach men in Midlothian."
Mm.
And now I've dropped that Midlothian part.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I was praying too small. Maybe I was thinking too small, but I'm like, "God, just use me. I want my life to count. I want to make an impact."
Mm.
I feel like I have enough sins in my past that I have a lot of making up to do. I have a lot of making things right that I need to do. So as I see anything about Men's Alliance being effective, whether it's a guy that just sends me an email and he's like, "Hey, just want to say thanks. Men's Alliance has changed my life in this way and that way." If I get something like that, or another tribe launch, or a great father-daughter camp out, anything positive and encouraging, I'm like, this is God saying, "You're on course.
Yeah.
Keep doing it. Keep going. I've heard your prayers. Keep going. Keep hitting the gas pedal." And I feel like God flows. I'm not trying to say that there's not going to be a lot of troubles and hardships.
Yeah.
Right? I'm all about
Yeah.
John 16:33, but
That's right.
but I do believe that God flows resources, and in my case, people are that resource. God flows resources to those who are going to use them.
Mm.
And it's like, if you're not using your resources, if you've buried your talents, God's going to take those away and he's going to give them to somebody who's going to use them for him.
Right.
And I want that somebody to be me, right? I want God to see what we're doing and the families we're changing and the lives we're changing. And I just want him to keep sending us more men, more, resources that we can use for him, because that kind of like reassures me, hey, we're on course, keep going.
It's good, David, because what you're saying and what you're really referencing is that idea, like that first night with your son, when you guys were sitting there at the fire and he looked at you and said, "Dad, what if nobody else shows up?" What you just stated to him and what you represented to him was that, son, it's not about satisfaction. This is about obedience, right? If God has called you to it, like, I want to follow through to that calling. It doesn't matter the numbers. This is more so about just being obedient to the calling and the purpose that God has placed on your heart. And look what God has done with it, my friend. From that first night of 5 people around a fire to now tribe number 93 across the country spreading, and Men's Alliance is booming and going everywhere. And why I think it's so imperative for such a time as this is because, you know this, David, there's a beat down on men. We talk about this all the time at Ignite, right? Helping men understand that, whether it's this radical push to feminize men, or there's all of a sudden this definition out there that's talking about toxic masculinity, calling men buffoons or just porn addicts, terrible dads, horrible husbands, abusers, so on and so forth. You and I both know this. Yeah, there is such a thing as toxic behavior, but there is nothing toxic about being a man. And so being able to help men understand their significance, and that's not just scriptural to the person out there listening or viewing, that is actually statistical as well. If you look at the stats, when a dad is present and engaged in the lives of his children, it shows that there is a lessening in the mental health challenges that his children face. There's actually an uptick in academic performance. There's actually an uptick in being able to develop that identity, male and female sexual identity in our kids, and also growth and development and leadership skills. I mean, dads and men matter, David. Speak to the man out there listening who maybe is questioning his worth and his value, maybe, hasn't always been the best, hasn't always prioritized the greatest things, or his family, or his relationship with God. Speak some hope into that man right now, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. A big part of Men's Alliance is mental health.
Yeah.
And guys don't like to talk about mental health. And as soon as a lot of guys listening to this heard me say mental health right then, they're like,
they cringed. Yeah.
Here we go. Another guy that wants to talk about our feelings. Well, here's the thing. Men are under such stress and pressure, and isolation. That's the biggest problem right there. Is we're under all this stress and pressure, and we're isolated. So that's like the two worst ingredients. You can make it through one if you don't have the other, but we men in America, we've got both, and so what we see is that men in America are higher statistics for suicide the older they get.
That's right.
And when I first learned this, it was so counterintuitive to what I thought. I would have guessed a few years ago that suicide was a bigger problem for younger people. When the older you got, the less like you were. It's opposite. The older the man, the more likely he is to commit suicide. So the only demographic that's committing suicide more than 50 and 60-year-old men are 70 and 80-year-old men.
Wow.
And so we know in the mental health community, we know that the best way to prevent suicide is by getting people into community. Yes. People are not meant to be alone. And it's when a person is isolated that they feel hopeless. Amen. And they feel like there's nobody they can talk to about their problems. So we've got men in this country, like you said, under attack. We feel like our masculinity, we feel like that's not an asset. We feel like that's a liability.
Right.
And we're like, man, what am I supposed to do with myself? I'm designed. I love to fight. I want to fight. I'm aggressive. All these qualities that I feel within me and that I feel like I've been designed for, culture's telling me those are all wrong and bad. Plus, we've got, mortgages, we've got jobs, we've got kids, and then there's this tremendous pressure to keep up this facade of having a great marriage and taking your kids on great vacations. And so there's so much pressure on these men. And if you're in that situation, men, if you're listening to this, and if I'm describing you, and if that's you, what you need in your life, because you can't get rid of all those pressures.
That's right.
What you need in your life is you need men to talk to about this. You need a whole bunch of men. You need to sit around a fire with 10 or 12 guys, and they're like, bro, I felt that same way last year, and let me tell you what I did about it. You need that camaraderie, because it's when we get out of that isolation, we build that band of brothers, we build that weekly tribe. That's when we start to find hope. That's when we start to realize that nobody's got it all together. Everybody's marriage has problems. Everybody's kids have problems.
That's right.
And so putting it out there and talking about it, Zach, reducing suicide amongst Christian men specifically, that's one of my biggest missions, right? I'm like, wow, man, if we've got Christian men isolated, getting away from the herd, right? If they've wandered too far off from the herd, We know that that's who the enemy, that's who the devil, that's who the lion goes after, is
That's right.
the isolated gazelle. That's the
Mm.
one who's in trouble. Men, we've got to do a better job of staying near the herd. And of course, none of us want to, right? Because
Right.
it's our tendency when things get hard, we all want to isolate. Like my natural tendency is when I'm having a bad day, I want to stay home. I want
Mm.
to not go to Men's Alliance because I come home and I'm like, had a terrible day.
Right.
Going out and working out and talking with dudes around a fire is the last thing I want to do today. But you know what? That's the day that I need it the most.
That's right.
That's the most important day to go.
Yep.
I'll tell you this. This was maybe about 4 weeks ago. About 4 weeks ago, I had a huge argument with my 16-year-old son
Mm.
right before our Men's Alliance on Monday night. And we were both planning to go, and then we got in this huge argument. He went upstairs, and it was like I should be walking out the door right now, and now I don't want to go, and I know he's not going. And my wife was like, "You are absolutely going. Don't even think about not going right now. You need this tonight more than ever." And of course, I knew she was right as soon as she said it, but I didn't want to admit it. So I just went, and I barely got myself there. Like I got there, and then I just sat down around the fire, and that was it. Like I didn't talk, I didn't share, I didn't say anything. I just got there and sat down and just stared at the fire and listened to the devotion that somebody else gave and listened to some men share. And then by the end, I was so glad I had been there. By the time we closed in prayer, said our creed, then I'm standing around the fire afterwards and I start talking with some of my buddies, and I'm like, this is a perfect example of why Men's Alliance. Because if I wouldn't have gone, I would have either stayed at home and the argument would have gotten worse. You know, I would have just said something back and then he'd have said something back, right? So, or I could have like done something unhealthier. I could have gone out, could have gone to a bar, right? But when I came back from Men's Alliance, one of the biggest surprises of my parenting life awaited me. When I came home, my son actually came out the front door and met me before I even got into the garage, and he apologized. I was floored, you know, and he was like, "Hey, sorry, let's have a fresh start." And so then I walked in the door. So elapsed time for me walking out the door to Men's Alliance and coming back was like an hour or less, and a 180 had occurred. Now, this doesn't happen all the time. I'm not saying, you know, that, but, you know, to me, that is what it's all about. It's always hard to go there, but we need it. Men need it. We need it for our relationships. We need it for our mental health. We need it for prevention of isolation, prevention of suicide, prevention of addiction. You know, there's a great TED talk from a few years ago about the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yep.
The opposite of addiction is not really sobriety, because you can be sober your whole life, but that addiction still has its grip on you.
That's right.
You're never free.
That's right.
You're just sober, but you're not free. And I think we find freedom, of course, in God. And God uses people. God uses other men in our life speaking to us. So I'm really, like, obviously I'm passionate about it, but I almost can't exaggerate. I can't overstate it, because so many aspects of our life get better.
Yeah.
When we shut the laptop, go outside, get with other Christian men,
Yes.
exercise. So you think about all these things that are happening in our brains. When we get outside, we get with others, we get fresh air, we work out together, and then we sit around and we get into God's word in a Christian devotion around a fire about our real struggles. So there's just so much magic that happens there. Everybody needs it. Who wouldn't want a workout and a devotion?
It's amazing, Dave, because as a mental health professional myself, you know, you're speaking to several of the homework assignments that I am offering up to clients, you know, every week when they're away from here in our time together. It's like, hey, like you said, working out, the physical health, really does have a heavy influence on mental health. But more importantly, more than anything, it's the people fuel. It's the community. It's getting outside of ourselves. Sometimes when we're going through the ringer, when we're going through tough times, like you said, as men, when we feel the pressure to protect and to provide, it's easy for us to turn inward and to naturally just grow so, let's just say, challenged, and we are almost afraid to even get that off of our chest. One, it might be because we feel embarrassed by it. Two, it might be because we feel like we're going to burden somebody else with our mess. But at the end of the day, to the man out there listening who maybe is isolating, as you're saying, who's maybe living that lonely life, what I believe about loneliness for a second is that it's the invisible illness of our day and age, and it's always the undiagnosed illnesses that are the most dangerous and deadly. A lot of men live what Henry David Thoreau would say, the mass of men lead but quiet lives of desperation. If you're a man out there today who really feels like you can do it on your own, and you're trying to be independent, and you're trying to be tough, and you're trying to gut it out and whatnot, just hear this from me. Number one, I admire your courage, but at the end of the day, you're just not that good. You know what I mean? My dad always told me that growing up. When it was like came back to community, it was like, if you're trying to do life alone, you're just not that good, because nobody can do life alone. We weren't created to, David. We were created to love and be loved and to be in relationship with one another. As we transition away from that topic of toxic masculinity, I'm then interested in diving into this concept of biblical masculinity. I'm reminded of, a passage in 1 Kings chapter 2 where David is on his deathbed, and he gets, in a sense, one final charge, one final encouragement to his son Solomon, who's about to be his successor and step in as king. And his words say this: I'm about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. David, as you mentioned, you're on the forefront of helping men really understand what community looks like, what leadership looks like, what discipleship looks like. For you personally, my friend, what do you think are some of the ingredients that encompass and encapsulate biblical masculinity?
Man, when I think of what is biblical masculinity, the first thought that I had was leadership, and then instantly right behind that thought was after failure, right? Like, I think biblical masculinity, whether it's David or Paul, and everyone in between, right?
Yeah.
Abraham, Jacob, some of the big ones that come to my mind, but these are guys who made enormous, terrible failures, sins, bad decisions. Paul was killing Christians. And so what we see time and time again is men who refuse to let their past failures define them. And they get back up and they lead anyway.
Yes.
And that's what biblical masculinity is. Of course, we're called to lead as men. Yeah. We are leaders by design, and by title, I would say. We're leaders by title and by design, and by nature. So even if you don't have the title husband or father, you're still a leader by design. And so I believe that one of the biggest lies that Satan uses is to tell men, you are disqualified from leading. Sit down and be quiet. You've messed up too much. You've failed, and your wife knows about it. Your kids know about it. So you need to sit down and shut up. You're disqualified. Let somebody else lead. Listen, that is an absolute lie from hell.
Yeah.
Every single man feels that voice inside of them. We all know our mistakes, and that's why our families are the hardest audience we will ever lead.
That's right.
I would much rather get up and lead 500 men than in a devotion than my family, because my family knows
my
you. Failures. They know my wife knows all my past. My kids know that I just lost my temper, and so it really requires us to lead from a place of humility.
Yes.
You have to go into that humble. You've got to lead by starting off saying, hey guys, I know I'm not perfect. I've messed up so much, but I'm not going to let that keep me down.
Mm.
Even though I've messed up, I still want to share with you this great thing that I was just reading in the Bible. I want to share with you this devotion I read. I want to share with you this verse that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I think when we go in humble with that approach, they'll listen.
Mm.
If
It's
you go
good.
in trying to act like you've got it all down and you're talking to somebody below you, man, they're going to see right through that and not listen. But man, believe me, no matter how much you've messed up, you
Yeah.
can still lead your family spiritually. Think about Paul, think about David. I think leading as a biblical man requires constant rejection of that lie that tells
Wow.
us we're disqualified, constantly getting back up and saying, hey, I'm not going to let that failure define me. I'm going to keep leading anyway. I'm going to keep going until God takes me home. I'm not going to just sit on the sideline.
Mm. It's so good, my friend, because what you're mentioning is leading, like you said, with humility, but also leading with a servant's heart, right? Having a
Yeah.
proper perspective of what leadership is really all about. The Bible really rarely even mentions the word leader. I think it maybe mentions it once. I'm not even sure if it mentions it at all. It mainly talks about what it looks like to be a servant, right? You don't
Yeah.
have to lead in order to serve, but you have to serve in order to lead. The scripture even says that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And I love just the humility you approach leadership with. It's evident, right? In your vulnerability and your authenticity, even in our conversation today, talking about some challenging times, some challenging conversations, some challenging interactions with your wife, with your kids. That stuff is so important because at the end of the day, nobody's perfect. But we
Yeah.
should all be on that, in a sense, process of progress. That's what we're in together.
Yeah.
And if we can champion each other, if we can fuel each other, if we can stoke each other's flame along the way, that's what brotherhood is really all about, right? Proverbs 17:17, what that talks about is a friend is born, right, for all challenges in a sense, but a brother is born for times of adversity. We need
Yeah.
brothers to continue to step into our lives for such a time as this. David, let me ask you, to the listener viewer out there who may be interested, they want to get plugged in to Men's Alliance, where can they go to find out more, or where could they go to potentially get plugged into a local tribe?
Yeah. So, best thing to do is go to our website, men'salliancetribe.com. Men'salliancetribe.com. We've made it easy for you to find a tribe near
Yeah.
you, to listen to our podcast, or to come to one of our weekend experiences. Those are the three big things we're doing in Men's Alliance. We've got the weekly tribes around the country, we've got the weekly podcast, and we've got weekend experiences. So if you look at the map on our website and you get discouraged that there's not a tribe in your area, we've got a weekend experience just for you. It's called Start the Fire. And so you can come to one of our Start the Fire events, and it is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's one of the coolest things that we do is Start the Fire. We've done a couple of these in Virginia, and we're about to do one this year in Pennsylvania. It'll be our first one
Nice.
in Pennsylvania, so I'm excited about that. And then in early 2025, we'll be bringing it to Dallas. And
Wow.
so right after Ignite Dallas, while we're
Yes.
down there for that, we'll be planning that next event with you. So
Nice.
what this is this is an opportunity for a guy to learn how Men's Alliance is done
Yeah.
in a one weekend immersive Men's Alliance 101 experience. Learning how to lead is what that event is all about.
Wow.
When a guy comes to Start the Fire, he is not a spectator. He is not going to just sit and listen to us all weekend.
Mm.
If you come to Start the Fire, by the end of it, right, we're going to start off by we're going to lead and we're going to put you through a Men's Alliance style workout, Men's Alliance style devotion. But then by the end of it, you're going to be leading us in a workout and a devotion. And yes, you will literally start a fire,
Wow.
as well as figuratively. So it's a lot of fun. We take men who have never led a devotion in their life. We take men who have never prayed out loud before in their life. And we take men who've never built a fire before in their life. And we send them home ready to lead at all three. So that's part of how we're reaching men that don't even live near tribes is through Start the Fire. But also, if a guy just wants to start a Men's Alliance tribe at his church, we have a tribe launch team.
Wow.
For each region of the U.S. who's ready to just help a guy launch a tribe at his church or his community or wherever. So it's launching a tribe. I'll just say this.
Yeah.
It's very simple. The ingredients are simple, right? Men's Alliance is a 30-minute workout, 30-minute devotion around a fire. It's so simple, only a man could come up with it. But it's not easy. Right. It's simple, but not easy.
That's right.
And so, we're looking for men. We're all the time looking for men who want to step up and start a tribe in their area. Man, we got a whole team ready to help you out. If I can do it, anybody can do it. You need 5 guys and a fire, and you do some push-ups and some burpees. You get uncomfortable. You flip a tractor tire, and then while you're catching your breath and you're drinking some water, you open it up in prayer and ask what's on people's hearts and minds tonight. And sometimes that's literally the only question you need to lead a devotion right there.
That's it. Again, it's men'salliancetribe.com. For anybody listening or viewing, I'll actually put that link in our show notes. I would encourage all of the men, get involved, be a part of what David and just his entire team at Men's Alliance are doing. I love what you guys, are doing naturally because it aligns kind of with what I have kind of come up with in terms of my equation as how to win the day. I have 3 S's that I try to live by: surrender, suffer, serve, right? Surrender it's not a morning by morning, it's a moment by moment thing to the Holy Spirit, his leading, his guidance, his direction for my life. Number 2, suffer, do something hard. Like you said, do a workout of some sorts that reminds me that I'm capable of overcoming. Number 3 is serve somebody else. Do something in community each and every day. What I want to kind of leave us with, right, before we wrap this thing up, I ask you one final question. I wanted to read your creed because I want somebody that's out there listening to understand what you guys are really all about. It reads, I'm a common man with an uncommon desire to succeed. I will keep myself physically strong, spiritually awake, and morally straight. I expect to lead and be led, and in the absence of leadership, I will take charge and lead by example. I am not too proud to ask for help. I belong to a tribe and do not struggle alone. My past failures do not define me. When the world knocks me down, I will get back up every time. Faithfulness to family and devotion to God will be my legacy, and I will finish strong. David, my friend, as we wrap this up, what I always love to do is I always love to give our listener the opportunity to share a pressing word that God has placed on their heart for such a time as this. So today, as I mentioned, we're going into Father's Day weekend, just a few days away, and I just know, David, that there is a man on the other side, either listening or watching this on YouTube, that is struggling, right? They're going through a difficult season of life. Maybe they've made mistake after mistake. Maybe they have a past riddled with what they would call failures. Maybe they've just been disengaged from the home as a husband and as a father. What's one final word of encouragement that would hopefully spark a little bit of hope, encouragement, and motivation for the road forward for them to live and lead a built different life today on out?
Tribe. Tribe. Before Jesus started his own ministry, he built his tribe. He walked around and he handpicked 12 dudes to help him, to travel with him, to fish with him. They walked a lot together. They boated a lot together. And when you look through history, I love the American Revolution. I love that period of history where this country is actually being born out of another country and that struggle for existence. And whether you're talking the Wild West or the American Revolution or New Testament, everything good and big and important and powerful that has happened through history was accomplished by a tribe. It was never an isolated man. The Lone Ranger is a myth. It's always men in brotherhood with each other. So, if you're listening to this and it's Father's Day, maybe you didn't have a good relationship with your father.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have a good relationship with your son. Whichever side of that equation you might find yourself on, I'll tell you this, you can always build a tribe.
Well,
A tribe will always be there for you. We all have difficult relationships. We don't get to choose our families. And that can be something that a lot of men allow to really hold them back in life. And I would just encourage you, build your tribe, because that is something that you do get to choose and that can always be there for you.
it's so good. Build your tribe today and find people that won't just surround you, but people that will support you and sharpen you for every step of the way. David Mills, my friend, thank you so much just for your willingness to join us today, for all of the incredible things that God is doing in and through your life, as well as through Men's Alliance. I'm so grateful for the ministry that God has entrusted to you. Let me tell you this, my friend, happy Father's Day from all of us here at Built Different, Ignite Men's Ministry, as well as the American Association of Christian Counselors. I love and appreciate you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, bro. Thanks so much for having us on the podcast. We love what you're doing, too. We can't wait to ignite with you in Texas.
Appreciate you, brother.